Okay, so have you ever been in a conversation where it just doesn't click, you know? Like you're talking, the other person's talking, but it feels like you're on completely different planets.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
like you're trying to connect two puzzle pieces that just, well, they just won't fit no matter how much you try.
Exactly. And it's frustrating, but then maybe rarer, you have those conversations that just flow like magic,
Hmm.
where you feel completely understood, totally in sync, and you walk away feeling, I don't know, energized, like your brains just click together somehow.
Yeah, that amazing feeling. And you often can't even put your finger on why it felt so good, right? It just did.
Right.
Well, that feeling, that sense of alignment, it's actually a really fundamental human craving. Neuroscientists even have a name for it, you know?
Oh, really? What is?
They call it neural entrainment. It's this fascinating biological thing where when we really connect our brainwaves, our heart rates, even like the tiny movements of our pupils,
Mm,
they start to synchronize.
seriously. For pupils.
Yeah, it's like our bodies are literally getting on the same wavelength. It creates this wonderful, sometimes unspoken sense of understanding. It feels good because, well, biologically, connection is crucial for us. It's how we survived as a species, forming communities, alliances.
That's incredible. So it's not just a nice feeling, it's like deep-seated biology.
Exactly.
It's an imperative.
And that's really what we're diving into today. We're going to unpack the sort of surprising science behind why some conversations work so beautifully and others just tank.
Uh-huh.
There's some fascinating new research, and it turns out that the people who are secretly masters of this stuff, the real connectors, they often seem, well, pretty unremarkable on the surface.
Right. Not always the loudest or most charismatic person in the room.
Not at all.
Yeah.
But they have this powerful, almost hidden ability, a kind of secret language of connection.
And that's our mission for this deep dive, really, to give you a shortcut to understanding that language.
Yeah.
Think of it as gaining some really invaluable tools. Yeah, tools you can use every day, right? Like in talks with your family or big meetings at work or just trying to understand a friend better.
Precisely. We want you to walk away feeling well-informed and hopefully a bit more equipped.
Absolutely. So we're going to break down these three fundamental types of conversations because, and this is a huge insight, a lot of the time communication fails simply because people aren't having the same kind of conversation at the same time.
That's such a core idea.
Yeah.
Imagine you're trying to figure out logistics like who's picking up the kids. That's a practical conversation, right?
Right. What's this really about? Logistics.
But maybe your partner is actually still upset about feeling taken for granted last week. They're stuck in a how do we feel conversation about emotions.
And you're just talking past each other, completely different wavelengths.
Exactly. Until you realize that mismatch, you're just talking at each other. So these three types, they each have their own logic, their own skills.
Okay, so what are they again?
First, what's this really about? That's the practical decision-making fact-based one.
Sure.
Second, how do we feel? Centered on emotions, empathy, sharing experiences.
Got it.
And third, who are we?
Right.
This one explores our social identities, our values, how we see ourselves and others in the world.
Okay. Practical, emotional, social identity.
Basically, yeah. And our goal today isn't just to understand these types, but to get the skills to navigate them, to aim for what we call learning conversations.
Learning conversations. I like that. So the goal isn't winning the argument.
Not at all. The goal is to genuinely understand the other person's world, their perspective, and also to help them understand yours, moving from talking at to talking with.
That sounds like a much better way to connect. Okay, let's get into it. All right, let's start unpacking this with maybe an unexpected story. It involves military intelligence and a guy named Felix.
Felix, right. So picture this. It's 2014. The Department of Defense needs better ways to teach persuasion and negotiation.
Oh.
Big stakes, global stuff. And they keep hearing about this one guy, Felix, as supposedly the best negotiator anyone's ever encountered.
Okay, so you'd expect someone pretty impressive, right? Like straight out of central casting.
Totally. The scientists involved, PhDs from top schools, they were expecting, maybe someone tall, commanding voice, sharp suit, the works.
And who walks in?
This totally, well, unremarkable middle-aged dad, mustache, bit of a belly, kind of soft, nasal voice, just ordinary. The scientists were apparently quite disappointed initially.
I can imagine. So what happened? How did he prove himself?
Well, the head scientist, probably a bit exasperated, asks him, "Can you just tell us how you think about communication?"
Yeah, get to the point, Felix.
Exactly. But Felix pauses, looks around at these, highly analytical minds, and says, quite softly, "It might be better if I demonstrated."
Ooh, okay. Bold move.
Then he turns to the most senior scientist there, a woman with a very direct manner, and asks her, totally out of the blue, what's one of your favorite memories?
Whoa. In a DoD meeting. That's
Yeah.
unexpected.
Right. You could apparently feel the awkwardness in the room. But what unfolded was pretty amazing. Felix didn't push. He just gently drew people out. He listened incredibly intently, encouraged them to talk about their own experiences or worldviews, and crucially, he kept showing them he'd heard them, reflecting back what they said, nodding, making them feel genuinely understood.
So he built trust.
Exactly. So much so that near the end, one psychologist, still frustrated he hadn't given them a neat theory, said, I still don't get what you do.
Uh-oh.
And Felix, again, very gently, very casually, asks her, you mentioned you're a single mom. What would you tell someone who's getting a divorce?
And did she answer in that setting?
She did. She started giving real advice based on her own separation. And Felix just pointed out the incredible thing that had just happened. She felt safe enough to share something deeply personal with colleagues after less than an hour.
Wow. So his unremarkable exterior was hiding this amazing ability to create trust and intimacy.
Precisely. He made people feel safe, heard, understood. And this ability, this almost instinctual connection, points directly to that core idea we mentioned, the matching principle.
Right, matching. But you said it's not just mimicking people.
No, not at all. It's much deeper. It's about subtly adjusting how you communicate, your energy, your tone, even the type of conversation you're having, to meet the other person where they are, acknowledging their state, showing you're willing to connect on their terms.
And this links back to that neural entrainment idea, the brain syncing.
Exactly. Our eyes dilating together, pulses matching, feeling similar emotions. It's that profound biological drive for connection kicking in. It's how we form bonds.
Like, some people are just naturally better at triggering that.
It seems so. Researchers like Sievers, they studied this, they called them high centrality participants, basically the natural hubs in social networks.
The people everyone goes to for advice, the ones who get elected to things.
Yeah, those folks. The ones who just make conversations feel better, more productive, more fun. We might just call them supercommunicators.
Okay, so how did Sievers figure out what they were doing differently?
He did this clever experiment. Had people watch these really confusing silent movie clips, like a bald guy looking stressed or a cowboy taking a bath, totally out of context,
Why those clips?
to see how people make sense of confusion together, how they collaborated when things were ambiguous. And what they found was super interesting.
What was it?
The supercommunicators, the high centrality folks, they weren't necessarily smarter or funnier. The big difference was in their conversational habits.
Okay, like what?
Well, first, when things got confusing or people disagreed, they asked way more questions, like 10 to 20 times more questions than others.
Wow, just constantly asking questions.
Yeah, but not just any questions, good questions,
Yeah.
probing, clarifying, trying to understand. And if the group got stuck, they wouldn't just push their own idea. They'd suggest taking a break, maybe tell a joke, change the topic slightly, anything, to ease tension and rebuild safety.
So they managed the mood too.
Absolutely. But the most crucial thing was this constant adjustment. They subtly mirrored shifts in other people's moods. If someone got serious, they got serious. If things lightened up, they played along. They were flexible, open to being persuaded.
So that's the matching. It's adapting in real time.
Yes. And it requires really understanding what someone's feeling, what they want, who they are. It's an act of generosity, of paying attention. And then, crucially, knowing how to share yourself back authentically. Without that deep understanding, connection is tough.
I like that CIA officer you mentioned, Jim Lawler, the one who couldn't recruit spies.
Exactly. He was trying to recruit this woman, Yasmin, who was deeply ashamed of her government.
Hmm.
Lawler threw practical arguments at her money, protection, a new life. He was having a what's this really about conversation. Logistics. Transaction.
But she wasn't there.
Not at all. She was drowning in a how do we feel conversation of fear, moral anguish, the huge personal cost. She just cried and ran because he didn't get it. He realized he had to build trust, show he understood her feelings, but he didn't know how.
Which brings us right back to those three conversation types. Lawler was practical, Yasmin was emotional, total mismatch.
Precisely. If we're not in the same type of conversation at the same moment, we're just ships passing in the night.
Okay, so quick recap again. What's this really about? Is practical, decisions, facts.
Right. How do we feel? Is emotions, empathy, experiences.
And who are we? is identity, values, social groups.
You got it.
Boy.
And the goal is always that learning conversation, trying to understand their world and help them understand ours.
Okay, makes sense. So where should we start applying this? Maybe with the practical ones, the what's this really about?
That's like a good plan. Let's dig into that. Hashtag tag tag 2. Navigating the what's this really about conversation.
Okay, so the beginnings of conversations, they can be kind of awkward, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's so much going on under the surface. We're making all these super fast decisions, often without even realizing it.
Like what?
Like, what's the right tone here? Can I interrupt? Is a joke? Okay. What do they think of me? What are they actually trying to achieve in this chat?
It's a lot.
It is. And this is often where that what's this really about conversation starts, kind of quietly. It's doing two main things. First, figuring out the topics. What does everyone actually need from this discussion?
Okay, getting the agenda straight.
Right. And second, figuring out how the discussion will happen, the unspoken rules, the norms for making decisions together.
So it's like a negotiation before the negotiation.
Exactly. A quiet negotiation over the what and the how. It often happens right at the start, but it can pop up later too, especially when you're focused on plans, choices, costs, and benefits, the practical stuff.
Can you give an example of this in action?
Sure. Researchers looked at this investment banking firm. Really high-pressure place, apparently lots of yelling, arguments, personal attacks in meetings.
Sounds stressful.
Very. So they tried something incredibly simple with one group of bankers. Before every meeting, each person had to just write down one sentence stating their goal for that specific meeting.
Just one sentence, like what?
Could be something like, my goal is to air our complaints and hear each other out. Or, this meeting is just to brainstorm, not make a final decision today. Really basic stuff.
And did that little thing actually help?
Amazingly, yes. It significantly cut down on the arguments and the attacks. People still disagreed, sometimes strongly, but they felt more heard, understood the intentions better, and were generally more satisfied afterwards, even without reaching a final agreement.
Wow, just from stating the goal up front.
Yeah, it clarifies intentions, makes the quiet negotiation more explicit, and improves listening. We see this play out all the time, like between a doctor and patient.
Okay, like with Dr. Ide, the cancer surgeon.
Exactly. Dr. Bayfar Ide. Brilliant surgeon, but he was so frustrated he couldn't convince patients with low-risk prostate cancer to choose active surveillance, just monitoring it instead of jumping into surgery.
Even though the surveillance was medically better, fewer side effects.
Overwhelmingly better from a practical medical standpoint. You show them data, charts, survival rates, all the practical benefits. A classic, what's this really about approach focused on facts.
But the patients weren't buying it.
No. They were often stuck in a different conversation altogether, more of an emotional one. Worries like, what will my family think? Am I being irresponsible? What if I'm in that tiny percentage where it doesn't work?
So they focused on the fear, not the facts.
Right. They'd fixate on the small failure rate, get suspicious like, are you pushing the surveillance thing for some reason? They'd ignore his advice and choose surgery based on fear or what a neighbor said.
That must have been incredibly frustrating for him.
Terribly. He realized he was in this high-stakes negotiation without even knowing the rules. Then he learned from a negotiation expert, Deepak Malhotra, that a key step is finding out what everyone truly wants. Not just their stated position, but their underlying needs and fears. And how do you do that?
By asking questions.
Exactly. Lots of open-ended questions that go deeper. So Ide changed his whole approach. He stopped lecturing with data and started asking questions.
What kind of questions?
About their fears, their families, their hopes for the future, what quality of life meant to them.
And did it work?
Big time. He saw a 30% drop in patients choosing unnecessary surgery. Just by shifting from lecturing to asking, to understanding their real conversation. As he said, asking what they want is an invitation for people to tell you who they are.
That's powerful. It applies everywhere, doesn't it? Understanding the real desire underneath.
Absolutely. And we see it again in that jury deliberation story with Leroy Reed.
Right. The guy who bought a gun as an ex-felon but never used it. The jury was stuck.
Stuck because the law seemed clear. Felon plus gun, guilty. But some jurors just felt it wasn't right. They were having different internal conversations about fairness, about disability, about intent.
Enter John Bali, the supercommunicator juror.
Yes, the literature professor. He instinctively got that this was a negotiation, not just applying law. And the first step, figure out what everyone really wants.
So he started asking those broader questions.
Yeah, things like, what do you think about handguns in general? Or what does justice mean to you? Not directly about the case facts, but about their underlying values. their sticking points.
He was mapping out their hidden agendas almost.
Kind of. He was cataloging their true desires, morality, autonomy, maybe just wanting to go home, or strictly following the law. And this taps into that shift in negotiation thinking from getting to yes.
The Harvard Project. Win-win instead of win-lose.
Exactly. Instead of fighting over a fixed pie, you try to expand the pie by understanding everyone's underlying interests and finding creative solutions. Bowley wasn't pushing his view. He was exploring everyone else's needs first.
So the negotiation wasn't just guilty, not guilty, but agreeing on what factors mattered, what rules they'd use.
Precisely. It makes you think, doesn't it? How many arguments could be resolved if we focused on underlying needs instead of just surface positions?
A lot, probably. But how do you persuade someone when their needs or even their way of thinking is just different?
Oh, well, that often comes down to the type of logic being used and recognizing which logic resonates with the other person. There are basically two kinds in these "what's this really about" talks.
Okay, what are they?
First is the logic of costs and benefits. This is for the practical, analytical mindset. It's about data, evidence, pros and cons, logical reasoning. Dr. E. Day's initial approach.
Makes sense. And the second?
The logic of similarities. This appeals more to the empathetic mindset. It relies on shared experiences, values, compassion, gut feelings, and especially stories. It answers the question, what would someone like me do? Or what feels right?
So Dr. 80 learned to switch between them.
Yes. If a patient was analytical, he gave them the data. If they were more empathetic, sharing stories about family fears, he shifted. He'd use compassion, maybe share a narrative.
Like telling them he'd advise his own father against surgery.
Exactly. Stories can bypass that analytical suspicion. They just land differently. They feel right. It connects on a different level.
And Bowley used this in the jury room, too, with the toy gun idea.
Perfect example. That wasn't based on evidence. It was pure conjecture. Maybe the gun looked like a toy. Maybe he didn't know how to use it. He introduced a story, a narrative.
Shifting from the strict legal logic to a more empathetic similarity logic.
Precisely. It reframed Reed not just as a lawbreaker, but as someone potentially confused, someone relatable. It invited jurors into a different way of thinking about him, creating enough doubt based on shared human understanding, not just legal code.
It really highlights how often we probably mismatch our logic, doesn't it? Trying facts when a story is needed, or vice versa.
It happens all the time.
Okay, this is super helpful conceptually, but what about practical tools? What can listeners actually do in these "what's this really about" conversations?
Great question. The research gives us some clear takeaways. First off, preparation. Even minimal prep helps. Before a potentially tricky conversation, just jot down maybe 2 topics you expect, 1 key thing you want to say, and 1 good question you plan to ask. It boosts confidence, gives you a starting point, even if things change.
Simple, but effective.
And for more involved prep, think about what you really want or need from the conversation, and try to anticipate what the other person might want or need. What does their side of the pie look like?
Okay, prep first. What else?
Second, asking questions. We keep coming back to this, don't we? But
Yeah.
focus on open-ended questions.
Not just yes, no.
Right. Ask about values, beliefs, experiences, decisions. Instead of what's your job, try what led you to become a teacher. It invites reflection, not just facts. It helps you see their map of what they care about.
Makes sense. Third.
Third, noticing clues. Pay attention. Listen for those little verbal nods, the yes, interestings. That's back channeling. It shows they're engaged.
And follow-up questions are good too, right?
Absolutely. Shows they're listening and curious. Also, notice subject changes. If someone suddenly shifts topic, it might mean they want to move on, or maybe they want to add something important that hasn't been covered.
Okay, watch the signals. What's fourth?
Fourth, recognizing mindset. Listen to how they're talking. Are they telling stories, cracking jokes, sharing feelings? That often signals an empathetic mindset, wanting connection.
Versus
Versus talking about plans, options, data, decisions. That's more of a practical, analytical mindset. You need to adjust your logic, stories, or data to match their mindset.
don't bring a spreadsheet to an emotional discussion.
Basically, yeah. And finally, fifth, experimentation. Don't be afraid to gently try things out.
Like Bowley's toy gun idea.
Exactly. Introduce an unexpected question, a bit of humor, a hypothetical, see how they react. Do they engage? Do they shut it down? Their reaction tells you a lot about the conversational rules they prefer.
So prep, ask good questions, notice clues, recognize mindset, and experiment.
You got it. These are skills we often have instinctively, but bringing them to conscious awareness and practicing them makes a huge difference.
Definitely seems doable, but, these practical talks are one thing. What about when things get emotional? That feels like a whole different ballgame.
It absolutely is. And that's crucial because beyond what we discuss, every conversation is profoundly shaped by how we feel. ##3. Unlocking the how do we feel conversation.
Right. Emotions, they're always there under the surface, aren't they? Guiding things, even when we're talking about something totally practical.
Absolutely. You could almost say that every conversation is, on some level, a how do we feel conversation.
Yeah.
Our feelings are the filter through which we process everything, how we react, whether we connect.
So how do we navigate that emotional layer better?
Well, there's this fascinating work by Nicholas Epley, a psychology professor. He actually taught hedge funders, not exactly the most touchy-feely group, how to listen better.
Hedge funders. Wow. How did he approach that?
He had a pretty radical take. He argued that forcing techniques like constant nodding or intense eye contact can actually feel fake and undermine real connection.
Interesting. So what does work?
Epley believed we listen best when we're genuinely interested. And what makes humans most interested? Hearing about intimate emotional stuff, personal experiences, vulnerability.
So opening up emotionally actually makes people listen more.
Exactly. When we share something real about ourselves, something vulnerable, it naturally draws others in. It often encourages them to reciprocate, creating this loop of deeper listening and connection.
So what did he do with the hedge funders? Ask them about market volatility.
Not quite. He asked them to share a time they had cried in front of another person.
Whoa! To a room full of hedge funders, how did that go over?
Apparently, there was an audible groan, like, oh, this is going to be terrible. The initial reaction was dread.
I bet. But did it work?
It did. It led to surprisingly powerful connections. People shared incredibly moving personal stories. It broke down the usual professional barriers. It makes you think, right, how often do we avoid those potentially emotional moments in conversation because we fear the awkwardness?
Yeah, we shy away and maybe miss a real chance to connect.
Totally. And Epley's ideas about this actually came from his own difficult experiences when he was younger.
Oh, really? What happened?
Well, he admits he was a terrible listener as a teenager. He got into trouble, a couple of drunk driving incidents. His parents, understandably, lectured him constantly.
Trying to get through to him.
Right. They were trying what they thought was perspective taking.
Yeah.
Imagining how they'd feel, telling him what he should feel. But he said it just washed over. They didn't understand his actual emotions, the guilt, the shame, maybe the defiance too. Why? Because they never really asked him how he felt.
So they were telling, not asking.
Exactly. It was a counselor who finally broke through. She didn't lecture. She just asked questions.
What kind of questions?
Open-ended ones. Why were you drinking? How would you feel if you'd hit someone? Is this the person you want to be? Questions that invited him to explore his own feelings, his values.
And that worked.
It did. By talking it through, prompted by her questions, he started listening first to her, then to himself. He realized his parents failed, not because they didn't care, but because they hadn't understood his emotional reality, because they hadn't asked.
That led him to this idea of perspective getting.
Yes. Instead of trying to guess or assume what someone's feeling, perspective taking, you actively ask them to describe their inner world, their feelings, beliefs, values, perspective getting.
So when we share how we feel, we're giving others a map.
Exactly. A map of what we care about, what matters to us. It's the only way others can really understand and align with us, achieve that neural entrainment we talked about.
Okay, but which questions work best for this kind of deep sharing? Is there a trick to it?
Well, this brings us to a really famous study, the Fast Friends procedure, done back in '95 by Elaine and Arthur Aaron.
Fast friends, what do they do?
They had pairs of strangers sit down and ask each other a specific list of questions. The questions started fairly light, but got progressively more intimate.
Like what kind of questions?
Ranged from when did you last sing to yourself, all the way to things like, do you have a secret hunch about how you will die?
Whoa, okay. Pretty deep. And what did they find?
They found that the usual ways we try to build closeness, finding common interests, making small talk, even working on a puzzle together, they didn't create that deep, fast connection.
So what did? The deep questions.
Yes. Specifically, questions that elicited vulnerability, sharing something personal, something real. That vulnerability seemed to trigger emotional contagion. You start feeling what the other person feels, and that creates connection.
But only if both people share.
Crucially, yes, reciprocity was key. Both people had to ask and answer the same question. If one shared an embarrassing story, the other had to as well. It created a shared journey of disclosure.
And people actually felt closer after this, strangers.
Remarkably closer. Often reporting feeling closer after just 45 minutes than they did to people they'd known for much longer. Even seemingly simple questions like, what do you value most in a friendship?
Yeah.
Could lead to really profound answers.
And follow-up questions help too.
Definitely. Asking follow-ups showed you were really listening and provided a natural way for the person to elaborate or share more.
Did Epley test this himself? Did it work outside the lab?
He did. He ran large-scale experiments and found, again and again, that people anticipated these deep conversations being super awkward, but they almost never were. And they consistently led to much stronger connections than superficial small talk across all kinds of people. His takeaway: we all crave real connections.
It makes sense. These emotional talks help us see who we're really talking to, what makes them tick.
Exactly. But it's not just the words, right? It's also about how we show emotion, how we respond non-verbally.
Okay. So emotional intelligence isn't just understanding feelings.
It's also showing that you've understood and that you're aligning with them. Through laughter, a gasp, a smile, a concerned frown, even just your posture.
Our brains pick up on that stuff automatically.
Super quickly. Mostly along two lines. Mood, is the feeling pleasant or unpleasant? And energy, is it high intensity or low intensity? When people genuinely laugh together, for instance, their mood, pleasant, and energy, often high, match almost perfectly. It's a nonverbal signal of, yes, I'm with you.
Can you give an example of reading this?
Think about NASA screening astronauts back in the day. Terrence McGuire had to figure out who could handle intense, close quarters living without cracking. Standard psych tests weren't enough.
So what did he do?
He started subtly varying his own mood and energy during interviews. Sometimes calm and serious, sometimes lighter and more energetic. And he watched if the candidates matched him.
Not necessarily mimicking the exact emotion, but matching the energy level?
Exactly. It wasn't about what emotion they showed, but whether they paid attention to his emotional state and subtly adjusted their own to align. It showed they took emotional communications seriously, that they were attuned. Matching mood and energy is like this nonverbal generosity, showing you want to understand their emotional world. That opens the door to empathy and real how do we feel talks.
It sounds complex, but maybe it happens more than we think.
Oh, for sure. Even in like a sitcom. Think about The Big Bang Theory. The first pilot actually failed.
Really? Why? It was so huge later.
Because the test audience didn't get the characters' feelings or their relationships. They didn't connect emotionally.
So what did the creators change?
They reworked it,
Yeah.
introduced Penny. But they had this challenge. How do you show the emotional awkwardness of Sheldon and Leonard, guys who are terrible at expressing feelings, without complex dialogue?
Right. How did they solve that?
With that brilliant scene where they first meet Penny and they all just keep saying, hi, back and forth.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. It was awkward but funny.
Exactly. The genius was how the actors delivered each hi. The different tones, the little gestures, the facial tics, it perfectly conveyed their confusion, their social anxiety, but also their desperate eagerness to connect with her.
So even though the words were simple, the actors matched the underlying energy and mood of wanting to connect, even in their awkwardness.
Precisely. The audience got that these guys wanted to bond, even if they were clumsy about it, because the nonverbal emotional matching was clear. It shows connection isn't always about perfect words. It's often about that underlying desire to align, communicated through mood and energy.
That's a great insight. And these emotional conversations, understanding feelings, they must be absolutely critical when conflict arises.
Oh, absolutely. Conflict is where these emotional undercurrents often run strongest.
Yeah.
And understanding them is key. ###3. Connecting amid conflict.
Yeah, dealing with disagreement today, it feels harder than ever sometimes, doesn't it? So much polarization.
It really does. You mentioned Melanie Jeffcoat's story earlier. Surviving a school shooting, then her daughter going through a lockdown years later. Incredibly traumatic.
And that pushed her into gun control activism, which puts her right into one of the most polarized debates we have.
Exactly. And the stats back this up. Something like 70% of Americans feel deeply angry at the other political side. People unfriend each other, block family members online.
So how on earth do you connect across divides that deep when talking about it feels like walking into a fight?
Well, Sheila Heen, the conflict expert from Harvard Law, has a really crucial insight here. She says the goal in conflict shouldn't be to win. It should be to understand why the conflict is even happening.
Okay, so find the root cause.
Sort of. She says every fight has the surface issue, what you think you're arguing about, but also a deeper, usually emotional conflict underneath.
Like your example of the couple arguing about having another kid.
Exactly. On the surface, it's about family size. Underneath could be anger about career sacrifices, fear about money, feeling unheard generally. All sorts of powerful emotions swirling around.
And if you don't get to those underlying feelings,
You never resolve it. You just keep arguing about the surface stuff. Because the real issues, the anger, the fear, the disappointment, aren't being addressed. They're the real fuel for the fire.
okay, so acknowledging the emotion is key. How did that play out in that experiment with the gun activists? The one in D.C.?
Ah, the advanced local experiment. That was fascinating. They deliberately brought together people from opposite sides, gun control activists like Melanie, gun rights supporters like John Godfrey, right during the huge March for Our Lives rally. Maximum tension.
Risky. What was their goal?
To force a how do we feel conversation.
Yeah.
The explicitly told participants share personal stories about guns, not talking points, not statistics. They wanted to bypass the usual debate tactics.
Get personal, not political.
Right. And it led to some incredibly powerful moments. Like David Preston, a strong gun rights guy, actually broke down crying while sharing the story of his mother's suicide when he was a baby, the grief he carried.
Wow. In front of people on the other side.
Yes. And his conversation partner, Melanie Jeffcoat, used this technique called looping for understanding.
Looping, what's that?
Instead of jumping in with her own view or trying to fix it, she just summarized and reflected back the emotion she heard. She said something like, "You want to let that pain go."
So she wasn't agreeing or disagreeing, just showing she understood his feeling.
Exactly. And Preston said it felt like he'd been truly heard, maybe for the first time. It built this incredible bridge of trust right there, despite their huge differences. Looping proves you're listening to the story inside their head, the emotional truth.
That's amazing. So focusing on personal stories and looping worked face-to-face. But what about online? That's where things usually fall apart.
You nailed it. They tried to continue the conversations in a private Facebook group, and yeah, it got ugly fast. New people joined who hadn't had the training, and the attack started. Someone got called a jackbooted Nazi.
Why does online make it so much harder?
Well, all those nonverbal cues we just talked about, tone, expression, body language, they're gone. Misunderstandings skyrocket. But a key problem, something marriage researchers see in unhappy couples, is the attempt to control the other person.
Control them how?
Trying to control what they say, how they feel, you shouldn't feel that way, or dictating the conversation's direction. Stop changing the subject. It's a power struggle focused on the person.
Whereas happier couples,
They focus on controlling the environment or the boundaries of the conflict. Things like, let's talk about this later when we're calmer, or let's stick to this one issue. They manage the situation, not the person.
so the online moderators tried to apply that.
Yes. They nudged people towards self-control, like take a breath before posting. Towards environmental control, suggesting less loaded language, like tactical rifle instead of an assault weapon. And boundary control, reminding people it wasn't a debate to win, but a space to share stories.
And did these nudges actually help online?
They did. The tone improved, fewer attacks. And remember John Godfrey, the gun rights supporter who cried? He actually reached out privately to Melanie Jeffcoat to help her handle attacks she was getting elsewhere. They ended up collaborating online, using stories and looping to discuss difficult topics like red flag loss.
Wow. From opposing sides to collaborators?
It shows these principles can work even online if you consciously manage the environment and focus on understanding. But conflict often touches on something even deeper than emotions or identities, who we feel we are.
Right. The who are we conversation, that feels like another potential minefield.
It definitely can be. Because when we communicate, we're not just bringing our individual selves, we're bringing all our group memberships, our social identities.
Like being a fan of a certain team or your political party or your profession.
Exactly. And these identities can subtly, or not so subtly, influence how we see the world and interact with others. Think about Dr. Rosenblum, the pediatrician struggling with vaccine-skeptical parents.
Right. He tried giving them more facts and it backfired.
Totally backfired. The more science he threw at them, the harder they dug in their heels. Why? Because for many of them, being anti-vaccine wasn't just about information, it had become part of their identity.
How so?
He noticed these parents came from totally different backgrounds. Liberals worried about toxins, conservatives distrusting government, libertarians fearing microchips. They agree on almost nothing else. But on vaccines, they were united. It was part of being a good parent in their group or a critical thinker who wasn't fooled by the system. Refusing vaccines reinforced their sense of belonging to that particular in-group.
So challenging vaccines felt like challenging who they were.
Precisely. Social identities make us see our own group, the in-group, as, smart and virtuous, and the other group, the out-group, as suspicious or wrong. Challenging a core belief tied to that identity feels like a personal attack.
Okay, that makes sense for group identity, but you also mentioned our individual identities can feel threatened.
Yes, and this is where Claude Steele's work on stereotype threat is so important.
The stereotype threat. What is that exactly?
It's this kind of invisible pressure you feel when you're aware of a negative stereotype about a group you belong to in a situation where that stereotype might apply.
Can you give an example?
Steele did classic experiments. For instance, he had women who were good at math take a difficult math test. When they were subtly reminded beforehand that women aren't typically as good at math, they performed worse than women who weren't reminded, even though they were equally skilled.
Just being reminded of the stereotype hurt their performance?
Yes. Same thing with black students taking a verbal GRE-like test. When reminded of racial stereotypes about intelligence, their scores dropped compared to black students who weren't reminded. The mental energy spent fighting the stereotype, worrying about confirming it, actually impairs performance.
Wow. That's a heavy burden to carry, and often invisible to others.
Totally. It means even without anyone being overtly prejudiced, just the awareness of societal stereotypes can hold people back. And we might accidentally trigger it by putting people in boxes, not seeing their whole self.
So how do we fight that? How do we make these who are we conversations safer and more productive?
Two key things emerged from the research, highlighting multiple identities and ensuring equal footing.
Multiple identities. How does that help?
Well, another researcher, Dana Greske, replicated the math test study with women. But this time, before the test, she had one group actively think about their many different identities: student, daughter, friend, athlete, Texan, whatever.
And what happened?
That group performed just as well as the men. The stereotype threat disappeared. Just reminding them they were more than just a woman taking a math test, that they contained multitudes, neutralized the threat. Focusing on only one or two identities didn't work as well. Complexity was protective.
That's fascinating. So acknowledging complexity disrupts stereotypes.
Exactly. And Dr. Rosenblum started using this. He'd find common ground with patients beyond just doctor and parent. Talk about being neighbors or families, or even just feeling overwhelmed by experts sometimes. It humanized the interaction.
So principle 1, draw out multiple identities. What was the second principle?
Ensure equal footing. This means consciously creating a space where power dynamics are minimized. No pulling rank, no flashing wealth or status, no giving unsolicited advice, making sure everyone feels their perspective is equally valid and has a chance to be heard.
Okay, multiple identities and equal footing. Where have we seen this work really well?
That soccer league in Iraq, Salma Musa's project, is an amazing example.
Right, bringing Christians and Muslims together after intense conflict. How did she apply these principles?
Well, first, multiple identities. By putting them on mixed teams, she gave them new shared identities beyond religion. They became teammates, defenders, strikers, members of the blue team or red team. These new in-groups became more important in that context than their historical divisions.
And the equal footing part.
Crucially, everyone got equal playing time. Historical status or group affiliation didn't matter on the field. Everyone was just a player, contributing equally. It neutralized those old power dynamics. And bonds formed incredibly quickly.
It shows you can actually design environments to foster connection across deep divides.
Absolutely. And this connects to motivational interviewing, that technique Dr. Rosenblum and others use with vaccine-hesitant parents.
How's that linked?
Instead of arguing facts, they asked open-ended questions about the parents' own values, beliefs, and other identities. As a former police officer, you value protecting people. As a grandparent, you want what's best for your grandchild. As someone religious, faith guides your decisions.
So they weren't attacking the anti-vax identity, but highlighting other positive identities the person held.
Exactly. It created a different kind of shared in-group, like, we are both people who care deeply about protecting our families. And from that shared identity, conversations about vaccines became possible, sometimes leading to acceptance because it wasn't framed as an attack on who they were.
So find the common ground in shared identities. Ensure equality that builds bridges. But what about when the topic itself, like race or politics, feels inherently threatening to someone's identity? How do you even start those conversations? ###C's, making the hardest conversations safer.
Yeah, that's the really tricky part. And the story of Netflix offers a stark example of this challenge.
The radical candor culture, right? Where
Yeah.
you're supposed to be super direct, criticize openly, even executives.
Exactly. Farming for dissent, they called it. No silent disagreement allowed. And it arguably fueled a lot of their success, attracted driven people. It seemed like nothing was off limits.
Until it was. What happened?
The Jonathan Friedland incident. He was a senior communications exec, and he used a racial slur in a meeting, apparently as part of an analogy about offensive words in comedy. He then repeated it later when explaining the situation to HR.
Oh, wow. How did that land?
It caused a massive internal conflict, a civil war, as some called it. People were deeply hurt and offended. It exposed the limits of radical candor. It triggered intense identity threat.
Identity threat. Remind me what that is again.
It's that awful feeling when you feel like you're being denied membership in a group you belong to, like feeling silenced or dismissed when raising a concern about bias, or when you feel unfairly lumped into a group you despise, like being labeled racist for a clumsy comment or oversensitive for speaking up.
And the fear of that threat stops people talking.
Absolutely. Especially about sensitive topics like race. The mere possibility of triggering identity threat, either experiencing it or causing it in someone else, makes people clam up. Netflix was suddenly asking, what are the rules here? What's actually off the table?
Which leads to the bigger question lots of places are grappling with. How do we actually make workplaces fairer and talk about things like diversity and inclusion effectively?
Right. There's been this huge push DEI training inclusion coaches. Billions spent. Lots of good intentions.
But does it work?
Often. Not really. Or not as well as hoped. Research shows things like mandatory unconscious bias training often don't change behavior long term. Sometimes they even backfire.
How could they backfire?
By making stereotypes more prominent in people's minds, leading them to maybe avoid interacting with certain groups for fear of saying the wrong thing. It can sometimes even hinder the advancement of the very people it's meant to help.
So the training itself can increase the fear and silence.
It can. It doesn't mean we stop trying to address inequality, obviously, but it shows that just running people through a workshop isn't the whole answer. Confronting prejudice is complicated, and the fear of career-damaging mistakes is real.
Okay, so if standard training isn't always the fix, what is a better way to have these incredibly difficult conversations, especially about identity, more safely?
This is where Verna Myers came in at Netflix, hired after the Friedland incident. She argued that just not being racist wasn't enough. You had to be actively anti-racist. But the challenge was, how do you get people talking about it without everything blowing up?
How do you create safety around discomfort?
There's a great study by Chiara Sanchez that offers clues. She had pairs of friends, one black and one white, discuss their experiences with race. One group just got basic instructions. The other group got a little pre-conversation training.
What kind of training?
Very brief. You just acknowledged that talking about race can be uncomfortable, explained why it's beneficial despite the discomfort, and gave them a few simple strategies for navigating potential obstacles.
And did that make a difference?
Huge difference. In the trained group, the conversations went much deeper. They felt more connected. For example, a white friend, instead of getting defensive or minimizing, could acknowledge and validate his black friend's experience of being followed in a store. The key wasn't getting rid of discomfort. It was giving them tools to persevere through it together.
So normalizing the awkwardness and giving a framework.
Exactly. And Myers used similar principles at Netflix. Her workshops weren't about finger-pointing. They were about creating space for honesty, for asking clumsy questions without fear of instant condemnation. The goal was messy learning, supported vulnerability.
Like that designer realizing his hiring bar was biased.
Right. That kind of self-awareness happens when people feel safe enough to be vulnerable and examine their own assumptions. So based on this work, we can pull out some actionable guidelines for any tough conversation, especially about identity.
Okay, let's hear them. What's guideline 1?
First, establish clear guidelines up front. Agree on norms. No blaming, no shaming, no attacks. Decide if clarifying questions are okay. Encourage people to speak from their own experience, I feel, not you are.
Got it. Ground rules.
Second, ensure equal footing. We talked about this. Actively welcome all voices. Don't let status or privilege dominate. Make conscious space for everyone to speak and listen.
Okay, third.
Third, Acknowledge experiences and seek similarities. Really listen for the feeling behind the words. Validate it. That sounds really hard. I hear your frustration. I'm sorry that happened. Then genuinely look for common ground, shared values, similar emotions, anything that builds a bridge.
Acknowledge, validate, find commonality, and fourth.
Fourth, manage the environment. Small changes can make a big difference. Maybe move a tense group chat to one-on-one. Start a tough meeting with some light connection first. Choose a neutral location. Be mindful of the setting.
Ground rules, equal footing, acknowledge and find similarities, manage environment.
Those four things. And at Netflix, implementing these approaches reportedly led to real shifts, more diversity, and crucially, more constructive dialogues, even around incredibly divisive issues, like the Dave Chappelle controversy. People still disagreed strongly, but felt they could talk about it and be heard.
So the takeaway isn't to avoid discomfort in these hard talks.
Not at all. Discomfort is usually part of the process. It's often a sign that something important is being touched upon. It pushes us to be more mindful, to really try to understand, to persist, because connection is worth it. The goal isn't perfect, painless conversation. It's gaining awareness of ourselves, our own biases, and the diverse experiences of others.
It's a journey of learning, not a destination of agreement.
Well put. And the fundamental importance of making that journey, of building these connection skills across all types of conversations, is really driven home by one incredible long-term study. #7. Outro.
Okay, so we've covered a lot, the different types of conversations, the skills needed, navigating emotions, identity, conflict. What's the big picture takeaway here? Why does mastering this stuff matter so much?
Well, it might actually be the most important thing. There's this incredible study, the Harvard Study of Adult Development. It's one of the longest-running studies ever, started back in the 1930s.
Following people for their whole lives.
Exactly. Hundreds of men, later women too, tracked for decades their health, their careers, their relationships, their happiness, trying to figure out what actually leads to a flourishing life.
And what did they find? Was it career success, money, fame?
Surprisingly, no. The clearest finding, replicated again and again, was stunningly simple. Good relationships keep us healthier and happier, period.
Good relationships. That was the key.
That was the key. More than cholesterol levels, more than social class, more than IQ. The people who thrived were those who invested in connection, in warm relationships with family, friends, community.
Can you give an example from the study?
Yeah, they contrast two men, Godfrey Camille. Started out described as neurotic, difficult childhood, predicted to be a loser. He even attempted suicide. But he died in his 80s, happy, loved, successful in his field, surrounded by people.
Wow. What changed for him?
He learned, as the researchers put it, love. He learned to connect, to share his joys and sorrows, to build warm relationships.
And who is the contrast?
John Marsden. Came from privilege, brilliant lawyer, seemed set for success. But he died lonely, alienated, deeply unhappy, despite his professional achievements. He, as the researchers noted, kept it to himself. He struggled to connect.
So connection isn't just nice, it's fundamental to well-being. Loneliness is actually dangerous.
More dangerous than smoking or obesity, according to some follow-up analyses of the data. Social connection is protective.
So bringing it back to our conversation today, all these skills, understanding these different conversations, it's not just about having better meetings or smoother family dinners, is it?
Not at all. It's about cultivating the single most important ingredient for a long, healthy, happy life.
Yeah.
Genuine human connection.
Wow. So what's the final thought for our listeners? Where do they go from here?
Well, there's no magic bullet, no single right way to do it. But the skills are learnable. It really starts with the desire. As one researcher put it, it's about wanting to connect, wanting to understand someone, wanting to have a deep conversation, even when it is hard and scary, or when it would be so much easier to walk away.
It's a choice to lean in, even when it's tough.
Exactly. And hopefully the insights from this deep dive help you be more aware of when someone shares something vulnerable, aware of which conversation you're actually in, practical, emotional, identity, and aware that connection only happens when you understand what everyone truly needs and wants from that interaction.
So the challenge is, pick something, pick a skill and practice it.
I think that's perfect. Maybe it's asking more open-ended questions. Maybe it's practicing looping for understanding. Maybe it's consciously looking for multiple identities in some you disagree with. Just commit to practicing something, because building that capacity for authentic, meaningful connection, that really might be the most important work we can do.